Let me tell you something before we get into the actual report. I've been working in the documentation corps for 11 years. I've archived training accidents, disciplinary hearings, diplomatic incidents involving cadets from 37 different species, and one truly baffling situation where a Vrelthi cadet managed to accidentally propose marriage to an entire mess hall through a misuse of the condiment station. I have seen things. But this file, this one right here, GUMA STD 7741 Blizzard Alpha, this is the one I pull up when new archivists ask me why the job matters. This is the one I keep coming back to, not because of the bureaucratic implications or the policy reforms that came after, or even the formal inquiry that took 3 months and involved testimony from 14 instructors. I come back to it because of one line. One line, buried in the middle of a 30-page incident report, written by a cadet who had just survived something that killed the will to continue in 52 of her classmates. A cadet who, according to every medical sensor on the drill field that night, had maintained a core body temperature warmer than the academy gymnasium. A cadet who, when the rescue teams finally found her at hour 19 of a 12-hour survival exercise, was sitting cross-legged in a snow shelter the size of a small house, cooking something over a fire she had built using techniques that our instructors later admitted they didn't fully understand. That line, written in her after-action report, in handwriting that was frankly a little sloppy because she'd apparently been tired, was this: the marshmallow ration was insufficient. Recommend increasing allocation for future cold weather exercises. Hot chocolate also would have been nice, but I understand resources are limited and I don't want to seem ungrateful. 52 cadets had failed the drill. 23 of them needed medical attention. In Cadet First Class, Mara Delvek's only complaint was about marshmallows. I've read this file probably 40 times, and every time I still feel something I can't quite name when I get to that line. Something between admiration and a kind of quiet, humbling awe. This is that file, compiled as completely as I can manage from every source I was given access to. Names included where consent was granted. A few details adjusted where medical privacy required it. Here is what happened on the night of the Class 9 Blizzard Drill. Section 1A, Background: the Galactic Unified Military Academy. The Galactic Unified Military Academy, known colloquially as GUMA, has operated for 140 years as the premier military training institution of the Galactic Compact. It draws cadets from 41 member species, each enrolled through their homeworld's nomination process, and it has a reputation, earned, by most accounts, for producing the finest military officers in known space. The campus is located on Verdantis Station, a constructed orbital platform in the Meridian system, roughly equidistant from the 7 founding member worlds. The station is enormous, built over several generations of expansion. It now houses approximately 12,000 cadets at any given time, plus staff, support personnel, and the rotating population of guest instructors and evaluators who cycle through on contracts. The Academy's training programs are famous throughout the Compact for one central philosophy, a philosophy that is literally carved into the stone above the main entrance in 7 different languages. Discomfort is the classroom, adversity is the teacher, survival is the graduation. It's dramatic, sure, but it means something. It means that the Academy doesn't believe in simulated hardship. It believes in actual hardship, carefully supervised, with medical teams on standby and safety protocols that are, genuinely, among the most rigorous in any training institution anywhere. Cadets die at GUMA roughly once every 30 years, a statistic the Academy is deeply proud of and works extremely hard to maintain. Class 9, the 9th cohort enrolled in the current academic cycle, was considered a strong class. 83 cadets from 22 different species, high scores across initial assessments, solid academic performance, good team cohesion metrics through the first 8 months of training. The Blizzard Drill was their class-level 4 cold weather survival exercise. Standard curriculum. Every class did it. The drill was designed to test several things simultaneously: cold weather survival technique, interspecies cooperation under stress, resource management, and critically, the ability to remain functional and make good decisions when the body was working harder than it wanted to. 83 cadets went into the drill. 31 came out having passed. One of them was Terran. Section 1B, the Cadets, a brief introduction. Instructor Veltera On's log, filed 2 weeks before the drill. Class 9 is a capable cohort. My assessment is that they will perform adequately on the blizzard drill, with some attrition expected. The cold weather component typically sees a 20–30% failure rate across species, primarily because cadets underestimate the cumulative physiological toll. I have no significant concerns about this class specifically. One notation: Cadet First Class Delvec Mara, Terran. Her academic scores are unremarkable, mid-tier on tactical theory, solid on physical conditioning, strong on field improvisation exercises. She's quiet, doesn't draw attention to herself. Her species file lists baseline Terran physiological parameters, which I've reviewed. Nothing unusual. I don't expect her to stand out during the blizzard drill specifically, though I reserve judgment. She did ask me last week whether we were permitted to bring personal items on the drill. I told her no. She said fair enough and didn't pursue it. I thought nothing of it at the time. The 41 other cadets in the failing group had names and species I won't list here individually. Not because they don't matter, but because they consented to their names appearing in this archive only in aggregate, and I respect that. What I will say is that they came from a range of worlds with a range of environmental baselines, and that cold weather operations was genuinely difficult for most of them. That's not an excuse, but it's a context that matters. The 31 who passed, also not named individually, for similar reasons, were, by and large, cadets from worlds with cold weather native environments, or cadets who had trained extensively in cold weather simulation prior to enrollment. And then there was Mara. Mara Delvec was 23 years old at the time of the drill. She had grown up in a place on Earth called Kessli, a small city near a lake in Central Europe, notable for cold winters and apparently excellent cherry wine, which she had mentioned in casual conversation several times, and which had no bearing on the drill except that it tells you something about her. She was not from a particularly extreme environment. Kessli is cold in winter, certainly, but it's not the Arctic. It's not the kind of place that would prepare you, you'd think, for a Class 9 blizzard. But Earth is Earth. That, as it turns out, is the thing everybody kept underestimating. Section 1C, the drill parameters and conditions. From the official Survival Training Division briefing document, drill designation GUMA STD 7741. The Class 9 Blizzard Survival Drill will be conducted on Training Platform Epsilon 7, the Academy's dedicated cold weather simulation environment. Platform Epsilon 7 is a 40-square-kilometer enclosed environment capable of generating sustained blizzard conditions, equivalent to a Category 3 storm by galactic weather classification standards. Conditions during the drill. Temperature, sustained minus 34 degrees Celsius at ground level, with wind chill potential reaching minus 52 degrees. Visibility, near zero during peak storm phase, hours 4 through 9, improving to approximately 15 meters during taper phase, hours 9 through 12. Wind speed, sustained 70 km/h with gusts exceeding 100 km/h during peak phase. Snow accumulation, anticipated 60–80 centimeters over drill duration. Terrain, mixed, open flat areas, ridgelines, forested sections, and a central river feature, frozen during drill. Duration 12 hours. Cadet loadout, each cadet will be issued standard cold weather survival kit, Mark IV. Contents: 1 thermal emergency blanket, 1 flint and steel fire starting kit, 1 24-hour ration pack, standard caloric density for the cadet species, as filed with medical, 1 folding shovel, 0.6 kg, 1 compass non-electronic storm-hardened, 1 signal beacon, emergency use only activation constitutes drill failure, 1 500 ml insulated water container, and 1 pair of cold weather gauntlets, universal fit. Thermally rated to minus 40 degrees. No additional personal equipment is permitted. Objective: survive 12 hours. Establish shelter. Maintain core body temperature within survivable parameters. Cadets who fail to maintain survivable body temperature metrics, as measured by implanted biometric sensors, will be extracted and marked as failed. Cadets who activate signal beacons will be marked as failed. Cadets who establish viable shelter, maintain viable body temperature, and complete the post-drill assessment upon extraction will be marked as passed. Medical teams will be on standby throughout. Extraction will occur immediately upon any life-threatening biometric reading. It's worth noting, as one of the instructors later said in testimony, this drill was challenging but not unprecedented. The conditions were real, but the safety net was substantial. Medical teams with extraction capability at any point. Biometric monitoring every 90 seconds. A thermal threshold trigger that automatically contacted extraction crews. The drill was designed to be hard. It was not designed to be unsurvivable. For most of the 83 cadets who entered it, though, it felt like the same thing. Part 2, the night itself, hour by hour. Section 2A, Hour 0, the beginning. Cadet testimonial filed post-drill, identity withheld by request, species, Vrelthi. We assembled at the insertion point at 2100 hours. It was already cold. They'd been cooling the platform for 6 hours before we entered, so the initial conditions were approximately -18, not yet at drill peak temperature. I remember thinking it was cold but manageable. I'd trained in cold weather simulation chambers before. I thought I knew what cold felt like. Cadet Delvec was next to me in the assembly line. She was doing something with her kit. I couldn't quite see what. She had her back to me slightly, and she was humming something quietly to herself. I recognized it vaguely, a Terran musical piece, something calm. She didn't look nervous. I asked her if she'd done cold weather drills before. She said, "A few times, nothing quite like this, but yeah." She paused and then said, "Have you?" I told her I had in a simulation chamber. She nodded and said, "Chambers are different from the real thing, the wind especially. You can't really simulate what sustained wind does to you." She said it conversationally, not ominously, just as a fact. At the time, I thought she was just making conversation. Later, I understood she was telling me something important, and I hadn't recognized it. The insertion signal sounded and we dispersed. Standard protocol, no grouping at insertion. Cadets spread across the environment and must find shelter independently or in pairs as they choose. I went northeast. Delvec went, I don't know which direction. I lost sight of her within 4 minutes. By hour 2, I was already struggling. Instructor Velterra on's real-time monitoring log, hour 0 to hour 1. 21:04, all 83 cadets confirmed dispersed from insertion point. Biometrics nominal across full cohort. Temperature on platform, -19. Wind, 40 km/h increasing. 21:18, cadet redacted species. Delvin biometrics showing elevated core temp drop rate. Flagging for monitoring. 21:22, cadet redacted species. MORATHI shelter construction appears to have failed. They dug a snow trench but appear to have abandoned it. Monitoring. 21:30, cadet Delvec Terran biometric nominal. Core temperature 37.1 degrees. She has stopped moving. Her position data shows she's in the forested section, approximately 1-2 km from insertion. She appears to have stopped within 30 minutes of insertion. Unusual standard protocol suggests cadets should spend hours 1-3 exploring and gathering resources before shelter construction. She may be panicking and freezing up. Flagging for monitoring. Note at 21:35, reviewing position data. She hasn't stopped. She's moving in a very small area, radius about 8 meters. Methodical pattern. She's not frozen. She's doing something. Can't determine what from sensor data alone. Continuing to monitor. What Mara was doing in that first 30 minutes, as she later described it in her after-action report. The first thing you do in any cold weather survival situation is resist the urge to move a lot. Movement feels productive. Movement feels warm. Movement burns calories you can't replace and makes you sweat, and wet clothes in a blizzard will kill you faster than almost anything. So you stop, you assess, you look at what you have. The forest section was obvious. It was visible from insertion, and the trees provide wind break. That was step 1. Get out of the direct wind. 30 minutes of wind chill at those speeds, and you're already fighting a deficit. Once I was in the trees, I did a resource audit. What did the kit have? What did the environment have? What could I build with what I had, and what could I build faster with what I found? The trees were a specific type I didn't recognize. They had a quality of wood that I wasn't certain about, so I tested a small branch before committing to anything. It was dense, good for burning, bad for carving quickly. That mattered for the shelter design. The snow depth in the trees was about 40 centimeters, with drifts against the north-facing trunks of up to 80. Good, more than enough. I made a decision in about the first 40 minutes. I wasn't going to build a small shelter for one. I was going to build something big enough to matter. That sounds strange, maybe, given that it's a solo exercise. But here's the thing, I knew other cadets were going to struggle. Some of them I'd talked to in the lead-up to the drill. Some of them I'd seen the biometric data for on previous exercises. And a big shelter loses heat slower than a small one per person if you have multiple bodies generating heat inside it. I wasn't building for myself. I was building something that other people could find if they needed to. I want to be clear, I didn't know if anyone would come. It was possible everyone would figure it out on their own. But I had the skill set to build fast and well, and it cost me almost nothing extra to build large. So I did. The shovel they gave us was honestly pretty good. I've worked with worse. Section 2B, HOURS 2 through 4, the Storm BUILDS. Instructor Velterra on's monitoring log, continuing. 2200, temperature on platform, -26, dropping. Wind 58 km/h. First cadet extraction, cadet redacted species, Delvin core temperature dropped below extraction threshold. Biometric alert triggered automatically. Medical team dispatched. Cadet extracted at 2207, marked as failed. 2215, 2 more cadets showing concerning biometric trends. Monitoring closely. 2230, second extraction, cadet redacted species, PLATHORI beacon activation. Cadet extracted and marked as failed. 2248, third extraction, fourth extraction, 2 simultaneous beacon activations. Both cadets extracted, both marked failed. Running total, 4 failed, 79 still in drill. 2257, Cadet Delvec biometric, core temperature 37.3 degrees. She is warmer than she was at insertion. I'm looking at this data twice. Her core temperature has gone up. The ambient temperature is -28 degrees. Her core temperature is up. She is either in a very good shelter with an active heat source, or my biometric sensor is malfunctioning. Requesting verification check on sensor 44, Delvec. Sensor verification returned at 2303. Sensor 44 nominal. Data accurate. Cadet Delvec's core temperature at 2303, 37.4 degrees. At -28 ambient, with a -50 wind chill outside the tree line. I am going to stop second-guessing the data and accept it. She's warm. I don't know what she built in 40 minutes, but it's working. Cadet testimonial, second witness, identity withheld, species, Creth. I want to describe what I saw when I found the structure, because I think it matters for anyone reviewing this later. I had been in the drill for approximately 3 hours. My shelter had failed, a snow trench I'd built following standard technique, but the wind changed direction and found an angle that cut through the insulation. I was not yet at extraction temperature, but my core temp was dropping steadily, and I knew I had maybe an hour before the medical alert would trigger. I was moving, trying to generate heat and find a better position, when I saw light. It was faint, just a very slight orange glow coming from between several large trees about 200 meters from my position. In a blizzard with near zero visibility, any light it's like a hallucination. You think you're imagining it, but I moved toward it because I had nothing to lose. The shelter was, I don't have adequate words for what she had built in approximately 3 to 3.5 hours. It was a Quincy design, a packed snow dome, but substantially larger than any Quincy I had seen in training materials. She had used the trees as structural supports, incorporating 4 trunks into the outer wall structure so that the snow shell was reinforced by the wood. The entrance was a low tunnel, roughly 60 centimeters high, angled so that wind couldn't drive directly into the interior. Inside the tunnel, she had placed her folded kit bags as a secondary baffle. The interior was approximately 4 meters in diameter, high enough to kneel in the center. The floor had been cleared down to the leaf litter below the snow, and she had laid branches in a lattice pattern as a floor insulator standard technique, but the lattice work was dense and even. Against one wall, she had a small fire burning in a pit she had dug, the smoke venting through a narrow channel she had cut at an angle through the snow wall, positioned downwind using, apparently, a small test she'd run with a piece of thread from her kit. The interior temperature was approximately, I don't know exactly, I didn't have an external thermometer, but it was warm enough that I immediately stopped shivering when I crawled inside. She was sitting cross-legged near the fire. She had a container on a small stone platform over the flame, one of the insulated water bottles from her kit, propped open, with snow inside that was melting. And I am not making this up, she had apparently mixed some of her ration pack contents with the water and was making something approximating a hot beverage. She looked up when I came in and said, "Oh good, I was wondering if anyone else would find this. Come in, close the tunnel, and knock the snow off your suit before you do or you'll wet the floor insulation." I remember staring at her. I remember thinking, this is not what this drill is supposed to look like. She pointed to a section of the floor across from her and said, "Sit near the fire. Your core temp's probably dropping, I can tell from the way you're moving. You'll be okay once you warm up." Then she frowned at something in her container and said, "I really wish I had marshmallows for this." I didn't know what marshmallows were at the time. I asked. She said, "Little white puffy things. You float them on hot chocolate. They melt into it. It's incredible, and whoever decided not to include them in the ration pack made a mistake." She seemed genuinely a little disappointed about this. I sat near the fire. My shivering stopped within about 20 minutes. I passed the drill. Section 2C, HOURS 4 through 7, the peak storm. Instructor Velterra ON's monitoring log. 23:30, temperature on platform -34. Wind 72 km/h. We are at peak storm conditions. Visibility outside, approximately 4 meters. Running extraction count, 11 cadets failed. 23:55, 14 failed. 12:19 failed. Cadet Delvec biometric at 12, core temperature 37.6 degrees. I'm seeing the position data. There are 3 cadet biometrics clustered within a small area that corresponds to Delvec's position. 3 cadets in one location. They found her. 4 cadets now in Delvec's cluster. I am watching this in real time and I genuinely don't know how to classify what I'm seeing. The drill is supposed to be individual assessment. There is no rule against cadets grouping. The regulations don't prohibit it because it has never been an issue that required a rule. Cadets group in pairs occasionally, never in groups of 4. 45, 5 cadets in Delvec's cluster. 106. The 6th cadet, I'm cross-referencing biometrics, was at extraction threshold 10 minutes ago. Core temperature was at the automated alert boundary. Then the data shows the temperature began rising about 8 minutes ago. They found the shelter. The shelter saved them from extraction. I am sitting here watching this data in the middle of the night, and I don't have the right word for what I'm feeling. Impressed doesn't cover it. Unsettled doesn't cover it. There's something else here. I keep thinking about that first note I wrote about her. I don't expect her to stand out during the blizzard drill specifically. I think I need to revise my assessment. Cadet testimonial, 3rd witness, identity withheld, species, Ithani. I found the shelter at approximately 1:15 hours, 4 hours into the peak storm phase. By that point I will be honest in this record because I think it's important, I was genuinely frightened. My shelter had not failed completely, but it was insufficient. The temperature drop from hour 4 onward was beyond my expectations, and my body was not adapting the way the training materials said it would. I was considering activating my beacon. I found the shelter by accident. I had moved away from my position to gather more material for my shelter wall, and I literally walked into the entrance tunnel. I didn't see it coming. Visibility was that low. I crawled through and I stopped moving for a moment when I got inside. There were 6 other cadets in there. 6 different species, including 1 Vrelthi, 1 Kreth, a Morathi cadet, and 2 others I didn't immediately recognize. They were all sitting or lying on the floor lattice near a fire, most of them wrapped in emergency thermal blankets. The human, Delvec, was awake and appeared to be doing several things simultaneously. Tending the fire, adjusting something in the smoke vent channel using a stick, and talking quietly to the Vrelthi cadet who seemed to be in some distress. She looked up when I came in and said, very calmly, "How's your temperature?" "You look okay, but you were cutting it close. I can tell because you're moving carefully, which means you're conserving heat, which means you've been smart about it. You're okay. Close the tunnel and come in." I closed the tunnel. I came in. She pointed to a space near the Morathi cadet and said, "There, Put your blanket on top of theirs, layering helps, and you're both medium mass so the heat transfer will work. You'll warm each other up. I did what she said. I was too cold and too tired to question any of it. Over the next hour, she checked on everyone in the shelter individually. Not in a clinical way, more like someone who is genuinely paying attention. She remembered somehow what each person had said when they came in. She tracked whether each person's shivering was decreasing or increasing. When the Vrelthi cadets' temperature was dropping despite being in the shelter, their species has specific thermoregulation challenges. She repositioned them closer to the fire and had two other cadets sit with their backs against the Vrelthi cadet, creating a kind of thermal buffer. At some point, she brewed another round of hot liquid from the rations. She distributed it. The Athani physiology doesn't process most Terran food, so she asked me, carefully, which components of my own ration pack were liquid-soluble and made something heated for me specifically from those. She had managed somehow to bring, or to improvise from her kit materials, a small container she was using as a cup. She passed it around. She said at one point to no one in particular, "You know what would make this perfect? Marshmallows. I know I keep saying it, but I genuinely think the Academy needs to consider adding them to the cold weather ration. It's not about luxury. They're calorie-dense, they're psychologically comforting, they float on hot beverages, they do real work." She seemed to think about this seriously for a moment. The Kreth cadet said they didn't know what a marshmallow was. She spent approximately 3 minutes describing marshmallows in detail. I was inside a shelter in the middle of a simulated Category 3 blizzard. 7 people crammed into a 4-meter snow dome, and somehow the conversation turned to Terran confectionery. I think that was the moment I understood that she was genuinely, fundamentally, completely fine. Not performing calm, actually calm. We all passed the drill. Section 2D, HOURS 7 through 12, the long watch. Instructor Velterra ON's monitoring log. 300 storm conditions at peak. Platform temperature -34. Wind 78 km/h. Visibility 3 meters. Total failed 29 cadets. Delvex cluster 8 cadets. All biometrics stable, all within safe temperature range. Note, I have been watching her fire management for 3 hours now through the position and biometric data. The fire has been burning continuously. In peak storm conditions, maintaining an open flame in a snow structure requires constant management. The smoke vent must be clear, the fuel supply must be managed to maintain heat without overwhelming the vent capacity, the oxygen supply must be balanced. She has not let it go out once. In 7 hours. I want to put something in the record. This is not entry-level survival skill. What she's demonstrating right now is not in the Class 9 curriculum. It's not in the Class 12 curriculum either. This is the kind of sustained competency that instructors are assessed on. She is 23 years old. She grew up in Central Europe. According to her file, she has no formal survival training beyond the Academy's standard curriculum. I've been an instructor for 19 years. I need a moment. 402 more cadets found the shelter. Delvex cluster now 10 cadets. Total failed 37. Note on resource allocation. The shelter is now housing 10 cadets on rations designed for one. I am, for the first time tonight, genuinely concerned. She can build a fire and maintain a shelter, but she cannot generate calories from nothing. 10 cadets on one person's 24-hour ration pack over a 12-hour drill. I'm cross-referencing biometric consumption data to estimate caloric status. Estimated remaining caloric resources in shelter. Significant. Several of the other cadets have contributed portions of their own ration packs. The aggregate caloric reserve in that shelter, based on biometric metabolic readings, is more than adequate. She asked each person who came in for a portion of their ration pack. Not as a demand, the testimonies I collected later all described it the same way. She asked, and explained why, and no one said no. She managed the resource pool. She turned 10 individual survival situations into one group survival situation. There is no curriculum for this. 600 storm entering taper phase, temperature -30 and rising, wind 55 km/h. Total failed 47. Total still in drill 36. Of those 36, 10 are in Delvex cluster. I'm looking at the 26 cadets who are still in the drill outside the cluster. Biometrics show they're mostly okay. Most of them built adequate individual shelters and have been maintaining temperature. This cohort isn't failing because of incompetence across the board. They're failing because the cold is a specific physiological challenge that some species handle better than others, and the ones who failed handled it worse. The interesting thing, the thing I keep coming back to, is the 10 in Delvec's shelter. Looking at the biometric history for each of them, 4 of them were within 20 minutes of automatic extraction when they found the shelter. 4 of them were going to fail the drill. And they didn't, because they found a warm room in the middle of a blizzard, built by a human who decided she might as well build something big. 800 storm taper continuing, temperature -24, wind 38 km/h. Total failed 51. One more failure just in the last hour. That brings us to 52. 52 cadets failed this drill. That is 62.7% of the cohort. The record for class level 4 failure rate is 58%, set 11 years ago during an unusually severe storm simulation. We have broken that record. And somehow in the middle of it, there is a shelter in the forest section with 10 people in it, all warm, drinking hot beverages, and apparently discussing confectionery. I don't know whether to write a formal commendation or just go sit quietly somewhere and think about what I'm observing. I'll start with the commendation. Cadet testimonial, 4th witness, identity withheld species, Morathi. The thing I remember most from hour 9 onward was that we talked. That sounds strange, but we had been in the shelter for several hours by that point. We were warm. We were safe, or as safe as you can be in a blizzard drill. The immediate crisis had passed for each of us individually. And there were 10 of us from 8 different species crammed into this snow dome that smelled like wood smoke and heated rations, and we just talked. Delvec started it, I think. She asked us one by one where we were from. Not our species, our worlds, our specific places, where we actually grew up. And people answered because the question was specific and real, and she was listening in a way that made you want to answer it. I told her about my home city. She asked what the weather was like. I told her it was hot, my world runs warm, and the blizzard drill was genuinely the coldest I had ever been in my life. She said, hot is its own kind of hard. I did a desert survival exercise 2 years before the academy. Hot is worse in some ways, at least in the cold you can move and generate heat. In serious heat, movement is your enemy. Then she paused and said, honestly, I think the academy should add marshmallows to the desert ration too. Morale is a survival factor and people don't weight it enough. She kept coming back to the marshmallows. Not obsessively, it wasn't worrying behavior. It was more like she genuinely cared about the practical detail of it. She thought it was an actual flaw in the ration system and it bothered her. Someone asked her why she cared so much about something so small. She said, because morale is a survival factor and people don't weight it enough. When you're cold and scared and exhausted, a small comfort matters more than the calories justify. The marshmallow isn't about the marshmallow. It's about having something to look forward to in the middle of something hard. That's worth a lot. We were quiet for a moment after that. Then the Creth cadet asked what flavor marshmallows came in. She said vanilla mostly, but also strawberry and chocolate, and there's a cinnamon one that I think is criminally underrated. She thought for a moment and added, we can get them in the mess hall actually. When this is over, I'll buy a bag. We can try the cinnamon ones. She said when this is over, not if, when. I noticed that. When the extraction teams came for us at the 12-hour mark, we filed out of the shelter in a line. It was still cold. The storm had eased, but it was still -20 out there, and the wind still bit. But we had been warm for hours, and warm stays with you. The medical team scanned us as we came out. Every one of us in the shelter, all 10, cleared medical without any intervention needed. The medic who scanned Delvec looked at her readouts and then looked at her and said, your core temperature is higher than the ambient temperature of the receiving bay. She said, I built a good fire. The medic said, you built a good, how are you? And then seemed to give up on the question and just cleared her. When they told her she'd passed, she nodded and said, good, can I get a snack? And this is a separate question, but is there anywhere on the station that sells marshmallows? Part 3, the aftermath, inquiries, reports, and conversations. Section 3A, the formal inquiry. The 62.7% failure rate triggered an automatic formal inquiry under Academy Policy 44F, Anomalous Training Outcome Review. The inquiry was conducted over 6 weeks following the drill. It involved review of all 83 cadet biometric logs, testimony from 14 instructors and training staff, review of the physical drill environment and equipment, medical review of the 23 cadets who required post-drill medical attention, individual after-action reports from all 83 cadets. The inquiry's final report is 87 pages long. I'm not going to reproduce it here in full, but there are sections of it that I want to include because they matter. From the inquiry final report, Section 4, Assessment of Training Conditions. The inquiry board examined whether the blizzard conditions on the night in question exceeded the parameters specified for a Class Level 4 drill. Specifically, whether conditions were within the design specifications for drill designation GUMA STD 7741. Finding, conditions were within specification. Temperature, wind speed, and visibility all fell within the parameters defined in the drill briefing document. The training environment performed as designed. The board notes that within specification and appropriate for cadet readiness level are not synonymous questions and recommends these be addressed separately. Finding on cadet readiness. The board assessed whether the cohort was adequately prepared for the conditions specified in the drill. This assessment is more complex. Standard pre-drill preparation materials were provided to all cadets and were in accordance with curriculum standards. However, the board notes that preparation materials focus primarily on technique and do not adequately address the cumulative physiological impact of sustained cold exposure for non-cold native species. The board recommends enhanced pre-drill preparation, specifically addressing this physiological reality for non-cold native cadets. From the inquiry final report, Section 7, Review of Cadet Delvec's Performance. The inquiry board gives specific attention to the performance of Cadet First Class Mara Delvec, Terran, whose actions during the drill constitute the most significant deviation from expected individual performance in the recorded history of this exercise. Cadet Delvec constructed a shelter within the first 40 minutes of the drill that exceeded in scale and functional quality the standards typically expected of cadets, completing Class 12 survival exercises. She maintained a viable fire within that shelter for the entirety of the 12-hour drill, a sustained duration that the board notes is consistent with the competency requirements for instructor-level cold weather survival certification. Cadet Delvec additionally provided effective shelter to 9 other cadets, at least 4 of whom were, by biometric data, within extraction threshold at the time they reached her shelter. Her actions directly resulted in those 4 cadets completing the drill rather than failing it. The board examined the question of whether Cadet Delvec's shelter assistance to other cadets constituted any form of regulation violation. Finding, it does not. Regulations neither prohibit nor require intercadet cooperation during survival drills. Cadet Delvec's actions were within the bounds of all applicable rules. The board further notes that Cadet Delvec's after-action report, while competently written and factually accurate, contains one passage that the board found. This is not a formal finding, but an informal notation by the board chair, somewhat remarkable. The passage in question reads, "The marshmallow ration was insufficient. Recommend increasing allocation for future cold weather exercises. Hot chocolate also would have been nice, but I understand resources are limited and I don't want to seem ungrateful." The board has forwarded this recommendation to the Logistics and Supply Division for review. It will be noted in this record that the board reviewed Cadet Delvec's performance against all relevant metrics and found her performance to be exceptional in every category assessed. The board recommends the following actions: formal commendation in her service file, consideration for advanced survival training certification pathway, and review of her course track with an eye toward appropriately leveled challenge. The board also notes, for the record informally, and without this constituting a formal finding or a binding recommendation, that Cadet Delvec's composure, resource management, intercadet awareness, and sustained competency over 12 hours of peak blizzard conditions represent precisely the qualities this institution exists to cultivate. It is unusual to encounter a cadet who already possesses them to this degree. She is 23 years old. She grew up in Central Europe. She builds a very good shelter. Section 3B, the instructors what they said afterward. Instructor Veltara on, post-inquiry statement. I want to say something that isn't in my formal testimony, because my formal testimony was constrained by what I could document, and this statement is not. Watching Mara Delvec's data come through that night, in real time on my monitor, while 52 cadets were failing, and I was authorizing extraction after extraction. It was one of the most genuinely arresting experiences I've had in 19 years of this work. I've taught cold weather survival to approximately 4,000 cadets over my career. I've seen strong performances. I've seen remarkable performances from cold native species cadets who had an obvious physiological advantage. I've seen, twice in my career, the kind of intuitive, sustained excellence that you don't teach, the kind that exists in someone before you meet them. Delvec is the third time. And here's what I keep thinking about, what I can't stop thinking about when I look back at that night. She decided to build something big enough for other people without knowing if anyone would come. She built for the possibility of people who needed help before she knew those people existed. She looked at her situation, solo survival exercise, blizzard, adequate resources for herself, and she thought, what if I'm not the only one who's going to struggle? That's not survival skill, that's something else. I don't know what to call it exactly. The closest I can get is, it's the thing that makes some people officers and some people soldiers, and the difference isn't about rank or achievement or any of the things we measure in this academy. It's about what you do when you have a little extra capacity and you're deciding what to use it for. She used it to build a bigger shelter. And then she complained about the marshmallows. I love that she complained about the marshmallows. I've been thinking about it since the night of the drill, and I genuinely think she was right. Morale is a survival factor, and we don't weight it enough in the ration design. I filed a separate recommendation about this to supply and logistics, and I am completely serious about it. Senior Medical Officer Tav Unruh, post-inquiry statement. The 23 cadets who required post-drill medical attention. I want to address this, because it has come up in discussions, and I think it's important to be clear. None of the 23 required extended care. The most serious cases were 3 cadets with moderate hypothermic symptoms who needed thermal support for approximately 4 hours in the medical bay. All 23 were cleared within 24 hours of the drill conclusion. The 4 cadets who were within extraction threshold when they reached Cadet Delvec's shelter. I reviewed their biometrics carefully in the post-drill period. Based on the trajectory of their temperature drop at the point they reached the shelter, my medical assessment is that 2 of them would have triggered automatic extraction within approximately 15 minutes had they not found the shelter. Their core temperatures were declining at a rate that would have crossed the extraction boundary in that window. The other 2 were further from the boundary, perhaps 30 to 40 minutes. All 4 passed the drill. I have filed a note in the medical record noting this outcome, and I want to be clear about what I mean when I say it. The shelter Cadet Delvec built contributed to a medical outcome for 4 cadets. It changed what happened to them that night. 15 minutes. That's the margin for 2 of them. I think about that sometimes when I consider what she built in 40 minutes at the start of a 12-hour blizzard. Guest instructor Ravath Sel, Interstellar Survival School representative, post-inquiry observation. I was present at GUMA in an advisory capacity during the inquiry period, and reviewed the drill data at the invitation of the Academy's training division. I want to offer one observation that I don't think appeared in the formal record. The technique Cadet Delvec used to construct the snow shelter, the specific method of incorporating trees as structural anchors while using a Quincy-style packed snow dome, is a technique taught in advanced cold weather survival courses at the Interstellar Survival School. It is a Level 7 technique, taught in the 3rd year of our advanced program. We do not teach it as a standard technique because it requires both theoretical knowledge and practical judgment about snow density, wood integration, and structural load distribution that takes time to develop. When I reviewed the footage from the shelter construction, captured by the platform's environmental sensors, I examined her technique carefully. She did it correctly, flawlessly in fact. The taper angle on the entrance tunnel, the density of the snow pack on the dome walls, the smoke vent placement, all of it was executed at a level I would consider passing for an advanced certification exam. I asked about her training background, standard academy curriculum, no advanced survival school enrollment, no formal cold weather survival certification outside of the academy standard. She learned this somewhere outside formal training. I asked her, when I had the opportunity to speak with her briefly after the inquiry had concluded, where had she learned this technique? She thought for a moment and said, books mostly, and some practice in the mountains near my home before I enrolled. I've always liked knowing how to do things in case I needed to. Books and practice. She learned a level 7 survival technique from books and recreational practice. I don't have a formal observation to add to that. I just thought it was important to document it. Section 3C, the cadets, what they said afterward. Because many of the cadets chose to give statements but not to be individually named, I'm going to do something slightly different in this section. I'm going to compile themes and representative passages from the statements I received, noting species where the cadet consented and using anonymized descriptors otherwise. On finding the shelter, the cadets who found Delvec's shelter described the experience consistently across very different species and very different circumstances. The words that appeared most often in the statements, across multiple languages and translated into galactic standard, were warmth, relief, and unexpected. I expected to be alone for 12 hours. I didn't know shelter finding was allowed to feel like rescue. The fire looked in the blizzard like something from a dream. On Delvec herself, she was awake every time I opened my eyes. I don't think she slept. She knew everyone's name after the first hour, everyone in the shelter. She used our names when she spoke to us. She was not afraid. I could not understand it. I was afraid, and I am trained, and I know my fear was physiological response and not a sign of failure, but she was genuinely, actually not afraid. It was different from pretending not to be afraid. She just wasn't. She told me when I asked how she was doing, that she was doing well, and that she had been in colder conditions than this on Earth on an average January in a year with a bad winter system, and that the fire made all the difference. She said this matter-of-factly and without boasting, and I believed her completely. On the marshmallow complaint, I include this because every single statement I received from every cadet who was in that shelter mentioned it. Every one. In different ways with different framings, but every statement mentioned it. She mentioned marshmallows at least 4 times during the night. She was completely serious about it. She thought it was a real gap in the ration design. I have looked into marshmallows since then, and I think she may have been right. When she said the marshmallow ration was insufficient, I laughed. It came out before I could stop it, just from the shock of the word marshmallow in the middle of a blizzard, and she looked at me very seriously and said, I know it sounds small, but comfort is a survival multiplier. She was not joking. I looked up marshmallows after the drill. I tried one in the mess hall. They're extraordinary. She was right. The ration should include them. Part 4, the human variable, testimony from Cadet DLVC. This section contains Cadet Mara Delvec's after-action report in full, followed by excerpts from her voluntary testimony to the inquiry board. These are reproduced with her consent, and in some cases, her active encouragement. She told me when I reached out to her for this archive that she hoped the record would be useful, and that if people learned something from it, she'd be glad. She also asked me to make sure the marshmallow recommendation was clearly documented. I have made sure the marshmallow recommendation is clearly documented. Section 4A, the after-action report, Cadet Mara DELVC. Cadet DELVC, MARAYNNA. Class 9. Species Terran Human. Home World, Earth Europe Region Central. After-action report, Blizzard Drill, GUMA STD 7740. Date filed, 3 DAYS post-drill. Summary of actions taken. Upon insertion into the training environment, I immediately moved to the forested section visible from the insertion point. Rationale, tree cover provides windbreak, which is the first priority in cold weather survival. Moving fast in the open before finding shelter is one of the most common fatal mistakes in actual cold weather emergencies. You generate sweat, you burn calories, and if you're not finding shelter, you're just getting colder and wetter. In the forested section, I conducted an approximately 40-minute resource assessment. I examined the snow density adequate for Quincy construction, the tree composition suitable for structural anchor use, the terrain slight southward slope, which meant cold air pooling would be minimized, and the wind pattern primarily from the northwest, which determined the entrance tunnel orientation. I chose to construct a large-format Quincy shelter rather than a standard-size individual shelter. Rationale: given the conditions specified in the drill briefing, I assessed a high probability that some portion of my cohort would face difficulty maintaining viable temperature in individual shelters. A large shelter loses heat more slowly per occupant, and the marginal cost of building larger was low given my construction method. I built for the possibility of additional occupants. I want to be clear. I built big because it was a low-cost option with high potential benefit, not because I was confident anyone would come. It was a bet with good odds. Shelter construction took approximately 2 hours and 45 minutes. I maintained fire continuously from approximately hour 3 of the drill through the conclusion at hour 12. During the drill, 9 other cadets found and entered the shelter. I assessed each one on entry and made adjustments to positioning and resource allocation based on their apparent thermal state. I asked each cadet who entered to contribute a portion of their ration packed to a shared resource pool, explaining the rationale. All cadets agreed. No safety activations were required in the shelter. All 10 occupants, including myself, completed the drill. Lessons identified. 1. Pre-drill preparation should include more emphasis on the cumulative physiological impact of sustained cold exposure, particularly for non-cold native species. The briefing materials we received focused on technique, but underestimated how different a sustained 12-hour cold exposure is from a chamber exercise. 2. Intercadet resource pooling is more efficient than individual resource management in multi-occupant survival scenarios, but requires active communication and consensus. Cadets should practice this explicitly. 3. The ration pack is well designed for its primary purpose. However, I want to flag one specific gap. The cold weather ration does not include any item that I would categorize as a comfort food. On Earth, cold weather survival tradition has long recognized that morale is a direct survival factor. Hot beverages, warming foods, small comforts have genuine physiological and psychological effects on survival outcomes. Marshmallows, specifically, are a high-calorie, high-sugar confection that dissolves well in hot liquid, providing both caloric supplementation and a morale boost. The marshmallow ration was insufficient. Recommend increasing allocation for future cold weather exercises. Hot chocolate also would have been nice, but I understand resources are limited and I don't want to seem ungrateful. 4. Fire management in a snow shelter for a 12-hour duration is feasible with standard kit, but requires continuous attention to smoke vent status and fuel supply. A small addition to the standard kit, a lightweight vent clearing tool, perhaps, would make sustained fire management significantly easier. End of after-action report. Respectfully submitted, Cadet First Class Mara Delvik.